Welcome to the Incredible Machines podcast, where we chat with incredible people doing incredible things. Today we sit down with a powerhouse of purpose, Debra Clelland, a global non-profit CEO, marathon runner, and mother of three, with a heart full of grit and a story that spans continents, challenges, and deep inner growth. In this session, we dive into what running the Barcelona Marathon taught Debra about breaking through self-imposed limits, why movement can be meditation and clarity can be found on the run, and how discomfort plus consistency equals transformation. But that's just scratching the surface. So settle in as we introduce the incredible Debra Clelland. So we're joined by the incredible Debra Clelland. My business partner Luke and I have joined on set here today. We're very excited to have Debra with us. And one thing I didn't get from you, but you could, maybe it's a great place to start, is if you could go back in time to when you were younger, when you were 16, say, what would you tell yourself?
Jon? Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I thought about that quite a lot, actually, because there's so many lessons I feel like I've learned in my life, but I do not feel that it would have been valuable at the age of 16 to have told myself any of those lessons, because I needed to go through the process of learning them myself and like having them drop into my being. But what I would like to have said to myself is that your life will turn out wonderfully. I don't think I knew that then. It was not... I didn't particularly feel powerful at the age of 16, and I do now. I feel powerful. I mean, I'm just a normal human being, but I feel a sense of power inside of myself that I can overcome anything that comes my way. I feel that deeply inside of myself. And at 16, I didn't have that. But it's been all these lessons along the way that's led me to this point of feeling that way. So yeah, I would just say your life will turn out wonderfully, because I don't think I realized that at the time.
Okay, yeah, I love that. I have thought about it. It can be a difficult question, because I think when I was 16, if I had to do my which was like buy more Bitcoin or meditate is the real one that I would say, I'd probably have just said to that weird guy staring at me going, I'd be like, yeah, cool story,
whatever.
bro. Like, yeah.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Progressed on and forgotten what it was. But if you could sit down, it sounds like similar to, we've had a guest before, Simon Granger, who said, trust the process. So it's similar in a similar vein.
Exactly. That's it. Trust the process. And I think I feel throughout my life, I've always had a strong sense of faith, faith in something, I've never been, super religious, but I have always been very spiritual, and I've always felt like there was a path. I knew, it was there. But when I was younger, I didn't know how to get it. I didn't know how to get that. I didn't know how to be powerful, and I've learned that over my life, I think. Yeah.
Also taking us back to like our first episode, where we had the quote was, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Exactly. Book them and they will come. That was from
Book
what
them
movie?
And they'll come.
There was a
Field
movie.
of Dreams, yeah.
Oh, no, it was
Wayne's World.
Wayne's World.
But it's
you know how many times I've thought that silly Wayne's World movie, which I don't even think I watched the whole movie, but I did watch the bit when he said, book them and they will come. Do you know how many times I've said that? Book them and they will come.
I think, and I stand to be corrected, but that comes from the movie Field of Dreams.
Okay, right.
Where it's build it and they will come.
That.
And
yes, okay. And that, exactly, absolutely.
And we talk about that in digital, and specifically in digital marketing. I reference that quite a bit, because you can't build it and they will come. You actually have to get them there with communication and paid media, and there's a whole bunch of different channels and things that you can use, but because people believe that like if you build it, people will come, and it's not.
No, because there's always work involved.
Yeah, exactly.
There's always many things involved in the people coming. However, you can hold a strong faith that they are going to come. I just need to do everything in my power to get them to come.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we were talking a bit about your origins as a Dixon, but then do you want to take us from there, from the beginning of the lifeline? Where did it start for you?
When I was born.
Where it starts for everyone.
This lifeline?
Please do. Yeah. So where did it start? Were you born in South Africa? Durban?
Yes, so I was born in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. It was Natal at the time. And when I was about 3, we moved to Johannesburg, where I spent my sort of senior primary years until I was about 12 or 13. And I have to say, I don't remember a huge amount from that period in time, but I remember distinctly that I didn't feel powerful. That's what I remember. I remember hating school. And I had a lovely childhood. My parents were great, and my family life was good. But there was something there, and I always had a faith. I had some kind of a rootedness, but I didn't know. I suppose I was lost. But every kid, I suppose, is lost. But there was something missing, I suppose, and I think it had very much to do with the structure of school. I think the school I went to was very rigid, and I just didn't resonate with that. It made me feel fearful, I suppose, of doing the wrong thing, and that system probably played into my character. My character is that I am inherently a bit of a perfectionist, which I've very much learned to move away from. But at that point in your life, you don't know that. You don't know that you don't have to be perfect. So, but then from there, I remember, I actually didn't put this in my lifeline. I forgot, but now I'm remembering. Quite a pivotal time. I remember moving. We moved to Durban, and I changed schools, actually, to Westville Senior Primary School, which where 2 of my 3 daughters have been at. One of them is currently there, and there was just such a shift. That the vibe of the school was so much more nurturing. It wasn't this, you didn't feel like you were going to get in trouble for every little thing that you did. Even though I was not a trouble causer, it just felt so much more welcoming. There was something about the groundedness of being in Durban that I loved, and I felt there was some kind of a homecoming at that age of 12 or 13. But then, I continued through high school. I went to Westville Girls High, which I have to say I didn't. Again, I just didn't enjoy. I had some really good times, but there was always there was a barrier. There was a being stuck in a system. That's what it was. That was just against my nature. And then after that, I went to, and then sort of my lifeline takes off a bit from there. I've got here, actually the first thing I've got, most significant thing, is the end of apartheid, which I remember distinctly at the Westville Civic Centre, standing in line. The first thing I ever did at the age of 18, the first vote I ever took, was for us to become a democracy. And it just felt like such a really great moment in history that I was living through. We don't realize that we are living through such significant historical times. We look back on World War I and World War II, and, people talk about, Anne Frank and what happened there. We, as South Africans, lived through significant moments like that. And I remember clocking that. It was just a very significant point in my life. I remember that. Then I went off to university, at which point in time I was highly ambitious, and I was going to conquer the world, and I was going to be, at the time I remember thinking, what do I want to be? Well, I want to be the managing director of Unilever. That's what I had in my head. Then I went traveling. And then all of a sudden I was like, I really do not want to be the managing director of Unilever. I want so much more, was what I realized. Seeing people, I traveled with a group of friends, very, very close friends. And we could spend the whole podcast just talking about those experiences. I remember almost being shipwrecked, literally almost being shipwrecked. In fact, we were shipwrecked. We had to be taken to shore.
Where?
That was we were going to do a trek on an island, and I remember getting into this ferry, little ferry. They called it a ferry, but it was felt like it was this wooden boat thing. It was weird. But we were going overnight to this island in where was it? Where was I? It wasn't actually Indonesia. It was Yes, it was in Indonesia. It was somewhere in Indonesia. I can't remember the exact specific place we were. And we went off, and the sea got hectic, and we were in bunk beds. And I remember lying in this bunk bed, and there was a cockroach. I hate cockroaches. There's a cockroach, and the ceiling was right here, was this big, massive one scurrying across here. And I didn't care, because I thought I was going to die. I remember that. The ceilings,
Sure.
the walls, the wooden walls were coming away from the ceilings. We were, if you looked outside, the boat was literally hitting the water on the side. We tried to go and find the captain, but we had to crawl along the floor to find the captain of the ship. I mean, I was young now. I was in like 23 or something, so you're invincible, but not in that moment. Crawling along the floor and finding the captain, who looked about 15, and saying, "Are we going to die?" And he was quite casual and he said no. But at some point in that night, we obviously got close to the island. We were, an island, and then these little boats came to fetch us. We all got ferried off, and we got then sort of rowed onto another island, which had nothing. And we stayed there for 2 days with nothing. I think there was some supplies they had, but it was like a stranded desert island. That's what I was on for about 2 days. And then eventually another little boat came and took us to the island we were supposed to be at. But anyway, so that was just one story of the many crazy things that happened in my travel, 3 years of traveling. Again, now that it's all coming back, that's a podcast on its own. But it was pivotal for me because I met these humble people in the world out there who could, like, we were in our tackies and we were really struggling to do these hikes, and we were fit young people. And there were these, guys from India or wherever we were at, and they would just literally be able, in their barefoot feet, to they were so agile and they were so rich. They were so rich, but they didn't have much. And I just remember one moment seeing they didn't have a lot of material things, and they would get, for example, I remember the one time the guy managed to buy himself a box of cigarettes. And did he put that box of cigarettes in his pocket and then smoke them one at a time to himself? No. He shared them. He shared all of those cigarettes with all his friends. And I just remember in that moment thinking, look at that. Why would I want to be the MD of Unilever? Look at that. So that was also just that whole time of traveling and seeing these different people in the world was pivotal for me to say, what do I really want from my life? And it also coincides, that whole time of traveling, I've got written here, my eyesight's not that great. I've got written here, self-discovery. So I think that whole time when I was traveling and we worked in London, we did the usual thing, working in London, making money. I remember working 2 jobs. I was a waitress at Sports Cafe and I worked for Guinness Breweries during the day as a credit controller. Didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing that. Many moments in my life, I didn't know what I was doing. This is the first, actually only now with my current job at Def Goods International do I actually know what I'm doing. Before then, I never knew what I was doing. People thought I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew nothing in my head. So, but it was also a very significant time of self-discovery for me. And I remember reading the book, The Celestine Prophecy. I don't know if you guys have ever read that. It was another pivotal. I remember the girl that I was waitressing with at Sports Cafe, and we were having a cigarette many years ago. I do not smoke now, just saying. We were having the cigarette break, although many enriching conversations over cigarette breaks. And she gave me this book called The Celestine Prophecy. And that, again, I just remember I read that book, and that was so instrumental in my mindset and creating a mindset of self-discovery, and that the world is actually not linear. There's so much more out there. So, in short, those experiences traveling was just incredible. Just an incredible time that completely changed what I wanted for myself and the standard I set for myself, not in terms of material goods, but in terms of enriching myself and enriching the world. And then I also met my husband along that time, and he taught me a lot about movement, which has become an incredibly important part of my life. I won't talk about that now, but and he taught me a lot. He has over the years taught me so much about community. He's just someone that pours into the community, and I think I've got that in me, but he taught me that I've seen the value of contribution, I suppose.
Just pause you there, because I do want to go to the movement and then come back to community.
Yes.
The movement in what, if we could just briefly understand what movement?
I think so. It's in its simplest form, just physical exercise.
Okay.
at the end of the day. So, but I mean, we could have the whole podcast on that.
Yeah, well, because it's one of the 5 things that I take away from like Dr. Huberman. I listened to this podcast, and it's light, sleep, vitamin, like nutrients. Movement is one of them, and then networking or community. So movement is so it is that movement you're talking about, physical movement.
So it's physical movement. Okay. And I suppose before I met Craig, I was not someone that did a lot of exercise at all. Did I do any? And we did all our dating at the Westfield Pool. Like, we were both too shy to say, do you want to go and see a movie, or do you want to spend some time together? So he used to wake me up. And in those days, we didn't have gates. He used to knock on the window, and actually it was my sister's window, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, and say, wake your sister up. And I used to go, and he used to say, do you want to come for a swim? And we'd go to the Westfield Pool, and I knew how to swim, but he taught me how to swim properly. He taught me how to run properly. He's been an instrumental person in my life who has kind of taught me how to gain from movement. And oh gosh, that is such a long story in itself. But at the end of the day, it's not about, I mean, I've done so many different physical things in my life, and I love challenging myself physically. But what is super significant in that is that I actually saw it the other day, because one of my favorites is Diary of a CEO, Steve Bartlett. Yeah. Probably many people's favorites, but I saw something he put on Facebook the other day, like 2 days ago, and he spoke about doing a 5K run. Yeah. And he said something about, your creative moments don't come from sitting down and say, right, I'm now going to come up with a strategy. Right, we need to strategize about this. What do you guys think? That sort of mechanical brainstorming is great, but your real moments come from, for me, moving. When I move and I'm running, it's different if you're going for a track session and you're going to, hit it hard. And sometimes you're just going for a run with a friend. But for me, I have this 5K route around my house. It's 5 kilometers. I push it in certain sections because I don't believe in being, if you're running the same 5K at the same time, you do eventually, that becomes stagnant in itself. So, but I mean, the ideas that have come, even like preparing for this podcast, I'm like, I always think, look at me talking. I always think, what am I going to say? What am I going to say in that? I have no idea. And it's never a case of preparing, right? These are things I want to talk about. It's running, and the ideas flow, and phrases come to mind, and what is important comes to my mind, and it's never written down, but it's somehow pinned through movement. Okay. So you talk about meditation, and amazing. I'd love to unpack that with you further at some point. But for me, I've always struggled with the sort of meditation, and being still. But I can meditate through movements. Yeah. When I actually let the thoughts flow instead of trying to stop the thoughts. Okay. Anyway, so that was the movement thing with Craig. He taught me. On that movement and meditation, I was in Hawaii now at a global leadership conference, and they did with Joe Dispenza was listening to my best.
So a walking meditation, but I think you can.
Right.
And it was absolutely beautiful. Yeah, it was it was on the beach in Waikiki, so
yes,
they were the worst places to be in the world. But
absolutely.
So what I do, and I don't know if this is what you get. It's the same to you. I've got so. We mentioned this before, Luke. I've got some superpowers that I know about. Like one is being awkward. I'm very good at that, and then the other one's actually being hairy. So bundle those together.
I haven't heard that one yet.
You haven't heard the hairy?
Yeah.
I'm very good at that's a superpower. And then the one that you brought me up to now is sleep. I'm incredibly good at sleeping. I can actually. My wife gets annoyed with me sometimes because she's like, I hit the pillow and I'm down, I'm out, and I track myself with this Oura ring and stuff like that. It actually says sometimes you go to sleep too quickly. It actually warns you. That's not necessarily a great thing.
Why is that not a great thing?
I think one of the things is it means you're exhausted. You're that exhausted that you just went down too quickly. So there's a lapse time that is. I think
interesting. And I think it's maybe like there's a processing moment that happens for you before you falling asleep.
Oh no, there's no processing.
Me too. I'm a sleeper boy.
Put your head on the pillow and
it's me.
Yeah.
So I like to go to sleep with big questions, like an idea or anything like that, and then not even think about it
Love
and
it.
come into, and someone asks me that question the next day
Yeah.
and we tackle that the next day. And usually the answer is
Absolutely.
there, or an answer is there, not necessarily the best answer, but like the best that I have.
Absolutely.
So where I've got that. So you get that from running.
But I also get it from sleep.
Okay.
I remember also when I was, because the next thing in my trajectory, we spent my husband and I 15 years in London, and I worked in investment banking where I was very successful, but a complete imposter. I'm like, didn't know what I was doing, but clearly I was doing it all right. But I remember sometimes I was in financial regulatory reporting, and we would be at month end crunching these massive spreadsheets and trying to figure out, like analyze certain patterns of things that used to come through from the trading systems, the risk management systems, onto these spreadsheets, and we had to figure out the pattern and what should be posted where, and it was my thing because I love data. I love data, and I like manipulating it. But sometimes it would just be like you're overwhelmed, you've overthought it, it's sort of sitting up here, and we would work long hours. We'd get home at like, probably 11 o'clock, and then I'd be like, oh my gosh, that whole thing was rattling in my head, and then I'd be like, I'd be falling asleep, and I'd be like, bring me answers. And I would fall asleep peacefully, and I wouldn't think about it. And I knew when I woke up, I wouldn't be like, right, what's the answer? It doesn't work like that. But somehow I would just let it go. And somehow the next day when I was at my desk, it came later in its own time. But somehow my experience was that, this is all woohoo and stuff, but my experience was that as I'm tackling the problem the next day, it just drops in. It just all came together. And I don't even know what was going on there, but that was so effective for me.
Yeah, it's the unit returning to source in my words. So yeah, so
the unit, is that us?
Well, the units, I call it the human body is the unit. So
yes.
You switch off. Like in those moments of sleep, like that is my superpower. I don't exist. It's like it's beautiful in a way. It's also terrifying in another way. But like the world does not exist for me. But where do I go? And I think you go to source. Is the woohoo. As you said.
Yeah.
But so how much time did you spend in the UK?
15 years. And,
wow.
and all that time I worked in different investment banks in London. And yeah, it was hard work in the sense of long hours. I also had my 3 children during that time. Okay. So yeah, Leah, Sarah, and Maxine. And if I look at my timeline here, and I also got married during that time, but the wedding itself was very, this lifeline talks about what was great and what was not so great in your life, and the wedding is not like a massively great thing because it was just, my relationship with my husband started way back when it started, and the fact that we had a wedding at some point was just an event, but it wasn't.
It was really foregone.
Yeah,
like
it was already foregone. Exactly. The commitment was there before the wedding. The wedding was just this lovely day. It was one of the best days of my life, definitely. But yes. And then, so 15 years in investment banking as an imposter, having my 3 children. And
so interesting that 15 years as an imposter.
Yes.
I mean, that's not. That's a feeling. So I totally resonate with that because I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And apparently I'm a podcast co-host now with Luke. We're doing this podcasting and performance marketing business. But yeah, that imposter syndrome follows you around. It seems to follow me around a lot. And for 15 years, and you still think that you were still thinking in 15 years at the end of that.
Actually, it was more like 20 years because we then returned back here with our 3 girls. We wanted to be close to the other thing is I was never belonged in the UK. I'm grateful beyond measure for the experiences I had and the things we did. And we did Ironman triathlons, and we created the most treasured friendships. Even at work, when I was an imposter, I had these wonderful relationships with my colleagues. Some of them are my best friends still. So it wasn't like I was having a bad time. But every time I walked into the building, I was an imposter. Like, I hope they don't discover that. I don't know what I'm doing. But I was obviously doing it right.
Yes, because you don't get away with it for 15 years.
Yes, and I got signed off, like when you shouldn't be signed off. I kept getting signed off as a critical resource, in the business. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm a critical resource, right? So there was no belonging, from a work perspective. There was a belonging from a kind of relational perspective. Absolutely. It's so interesting. And the funny thing is also I kept, because it was that time when I was in the UK and especially the time when I had my girls, when they were very young, it was a massive time of self-growth for me. So you would hear things and people would say, you are not an imposter, you are enough. All these sayings, you are enough. And I used to, but I couldn't change the fact that I felt like an imposter. But it's only later in life that things happen that things just arrive. But they didn't just arrive. I think they just arrived, but they didn't just arrive because I remember doing, I never actually did a vision board, but I used to, during those years, do so much visualization about how I wanted my life to be. And about like a year ago, I was like, do you realize that what you envisioned your life to be is what it is right now? Do you actually get that? It like dropped in like, oh my goodness, how powerful was that? And my life is not perfect. Let's make no mistakes. I'm not perfect at my job. I'm definitely not a perfect mother. I'm not a perfect wife. I'm not, there's many, many things to be improved upon. But there's a deep sense of like, this is my life. This is how it was meant to be. And and all the lessons that I've learned, like deep lessons that I've learned, which one of them I've got written here. Should I talk about that?
Yeah, go for it.
I might as well. So I've got written on this timeline. I have got a period. I've got very few things that are where life was bad. But just to say that after I went traveling and I'd been to university and all of that, there's a definite low point. It didn't last for long, probably about a month. I've written here, where am I? It was that sense of like, now you've done now you actually have to live in the normal life and put on clothes and go to work and do something. And I was lost. I worked for my dad's business for a while. It wasn't for me. Where am I and what am I doing? Anyway, so that just to say, but that only lasted about a month. And then, but what I've got here, the most, I think this is probably the most significant thing that ever happened to me in my life. And I've got written here, Barcelona Marathon. Okay. So when this was before I had kids actually, it was, maybe 3 years after I got married. I don't know exactly, I can't remember exactly what year it was. Maybe it was 2007, I think that's when it was. But I ran the Barcelona Marathon and I'd done many marathons and we were doing Ironmans. We were doing a lot of sort of not extreme sports, long distance sports and stuff and loving it. We had a wonderful group of people. It was excellent. And I remember standing in the start of this marathon, and it was the second time I'd run at Barcelona. We used to always go to a different city in Europe, and in the crowds of people, and I'd lost everybody we were with, and I was standing there and I was like, a voice said to me, what are you capable of? So the idea is that I had trained to run a 3:20 marathon, which is a very good time. Previously to that, my fastest time was like a 3:17 or 3:30 or those sorts of times. And something dropped in and said, what are you capable of doing today? Don't put the ceiling on yourself of what you think you're capable of. What are you capable of today, actually? And I just remember having that come into my head. And I trained to do like a 3:20. And I said to myself, right, I'm going for this. I'm lifting the ceiling of the athlete I think I am. And I said, I'm going for it. I'm going for it from day one, and I'm going to see how far I can push myself. And I remember thinking, okay, there's a strong chance I'm going to completely bomb out of this marathon, and I'm going to do 4 hours, and I will be proud of that 4 hours, and I might have to walk the last 10 kilometers, but I'm going from the beginning as hard as I can. And this just happened on the start line, like it wasn't planned. And then I started this marathon, and I remember running, and I was 5Ks in, and this is 42Ks now. I'm going 5Ks in, I'm like, I'm dead. Like I was like 5Ks in, I feel like I'm doing a sprint. And I was like, hang on. And that whole marathon, hang on. And at about kilometer 20, I remember passing someone who was in our training group. He was a much stronger runner than me. And I was like, he saw me and he was like, what are you doing here? In his head, he was like double taking. And I'm like, we're going for it. I remember saying to him, we're going for it. And we were running together. He was and I ended up pulling him. This guy who was so much more capable, pulling him. And then I just didn't stop. I just carried on at this pace that I wasn't trained for. And then I remembered, like about kilometer 35, I passed. My husband didn't run. My husband's one of his friends, Richard. I remember smacking him on his backside as I ran past, because he was at that stage starting to peter out. And he just looked at me, and his eyes were like this. And then he tried to follow me, and then he couldn't. He was like, he had blown. But I remember just getting to the end and just up until even like that last 5Ks, I pushed it harder than ever. And I ran this 3:09 marathon. So if you're a runner, you know that the difference between like a 3:20 and a 3:09, 11 minutes that you haven't trained for in a marathon is huge. It's huge. And the lesson, which I have thought back to that moment forever and ever and ever, is about breaking the glass ceiling. So what are you really capable of in your life? And I needed to experience that myself to say, and I think what it is, and that whole marathon was so uncomfortable. I was dying the whole time. My lungs were on the pavement. Mentally, I doubted myself over and over again. What are you doing? What are you doing? Push, push, push. And then there was another voice, just push, push, push. But I think the essence in that is that, it's like that whole, that little, it's my best. It's the circle. And that's your comfort zone. And then the little dot over there, right away from the circle, which says this is where the magic happens. And that is it. So, but the thing is, that's what I did. I took myself out of I'm comfortable with, we are all comfortable with achieving certain things up to a certain level. And beyond that, in our heads, we think, oh, that's for other people. That's for the stronger people. That's for the better people. That's for the people more worthy. I mean, we don't say that to ourselves, but in our hearts, that's what we're saying. And the experience of pushing but what happens is that out of your comfort zone and where the magic happens, that space is incredibly uncomfortable. Right? And we don't want to feel that uncomfort. We don't want to feel that, we're not worthy to be in this space. We're not good enough for this space. But if we are willing to hold that discomfort, the ceiling is so much further than the magic is there, and you will break through to the magic. So, but someone could have told me this, and I'm sure they did tell me this. In fact, I'd heard it many times, break through the glass ceiling, whether it be financial, whether it be in relationships, whatever it is. But that moment in my life was probably, I've got 3 most significant moments in a silly running race where it dropped in. That's awesome. It's carried me forever. Since then, it's carried me, and I love it. I love it.
I love that. I heard you say, we're doing this, we're pushing it, and then you reference voices, yeah. So
I didn't even know I said that.
Yeah, we're doing.
Who was we?
We're doing this, and then you reference the voices,
yes.
and if you can, if you can get the voices cheering, that's the best place to be, I think.
Absolutely.
Because you will have that voice doubting you, and then, maybe it's David Goggins at the beginning that asks you that question, like, what are you capable of?
What are you capable of?
So I love that. It's an amazing, amazing story. You mentioned 3, so we need to get through those 3 pivotals. I've also, just to say, as soon as we're on this lifeline, I've got the 3 girls who are obviously Leah, Sarah, and Maxine, obviously amazing. My greatest gifts, any parent knows that. But I've also got, in that time, babies are hard. I also had some of my lowest moments when my children were very young. And in fact, now that they're teenagers, I've had a few of those on days. But it was hard work. My goodness, it was hard work as a perfectionist personality, especially, and also as someone who had been on this journey of self-discovery, and now you want your children to know all of those lessons that you've learned the hard way. And I suppose now I realize it's their own journey; they must learn their own lessons. But it was hard for me. But it was hard when the kids were small. And then what I've got here is this is the lowest point I've got. COVID is the second lowest, but the lowest point I've got was when we
discovered that my middle daughter, Sarah, was diagnosed as deaf. So, that was just the day. I remember the day and remember feeling for that day or those moments walking around the streets of London when she had just been diagnosed, thinking that it was over. Like I just couldn't comprehend that this diagnosis and what it meant and a disability and my lowest moment. But after that, it have been all my highest moments. But
that moment there, has that shifted your purpose?
Oh, it's changed everything. I mean, I always say to Sorry, you being deaf was the biggest gift that I've received in my life. So, yeah.
No, that's brilliant.
It was a miracle. And I don't ever want to put that burden on her because she's often said to me, I want to be hearing. So she carries her deafness with pride and beauty and with a sense of courage. But it's a burden for her, and she would rather be hearing. She said that to me. Hopefully in her life she'll shift that. I don't know, but I don't want to have the burden. She's got the burden of carrying that, and then I've got all the joy out of it. So I don't mean it like that, but
no, I get it. So we have this thing we've spoken about a few times on this episode, and it's echoed throughout and maybe not in these words, but the universe gives you what you need to evolve to your next level.
Absolutely.
And your 15 years slugging it and being uncomfortable, you mentioned that's where the magic happens. So that prepped you for something. Now the CEO role.
Absolutely.
There's the role. Sorry, I didn't take that up.
Absolutely. Exactly. I mean, everything prepped me for where I eventually got to. That's it. And this moment, and also in your podcast with Oscar, was interesting. He said when he discovered he got cancer, his wife cried for X amount of days or weeks. He cried for 1 minute, he said. I love that. But this was similar to that, in that it was grief. It was grief because you've lost what you thought you had, a child that you thought you had. But a lot of parents with deaf children carry that grief forever or for years or for months. I carried it for probably a week. And after that, I was like, right, what do we do? And that was pivotal for me because I had to then reinvestigate what makes us successful in life. Because now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, is she going to ever do A, B, C, and D? I had no idea. It was complete uncertainty. And I really had to go into what is it that makes a successful person, and honing back on the most important thing is a sense of worth. What is our worth to the world? And I knew what I had to do was build worth in this child. And if she has worth, she's going to be successful. She's going to be as successful as she can be. So it forced me back into this discovery. And I didn't know at the time, right, I need to build worth. I did know that, but I discovered it over time, and it led me to do a lot of reading and on mental health, and building worth and all of that. And again, I've done it very imperfectly with my girls, but I realized that a child that doesn't have worth carries a disability. A child that has a disability being deaf but has worth she's not disabled in any way. So that's been kind of my focus in raising her, and she's now 14. All of my girls are incredible machines. But what I will then say, two things related to that actually that have been really pivotal for me. But I co-founded an organization called Thrive with my friend Bianca. She's got 3 deaf girls. They in the sort of Kloof Hillcrest area, and I think that was so significant because it wasn't the founding of Thrive, and what the aim of Thrive was to support parents who have deaf children to come to a point of acceptance. Because if you can't accept your child for who they are, exactly as they are, you can't build. You have to have acceptance, and then you build. So our main job was to help these parents to say, this can be a gift. Your child, and to say to them, unfortunately, again, it's a burden for a parent to carry, but you are the most important person here. It's not the audiologist. It's not the hearing aids. It's not the cochlear implant. It's not the sign language. It's not any of that. It's not the teacher. It's you. You are the one that's going to build the worth in your child. So, and that was the job of Thrive, really, to say, how do we give a community to, and make, the slogan was, you are not alone, to know that you are not alone and to build that community, I think was such incredible work. So I'm very proud of that. But why this is highlighted here is because I learned about partnering with someone who does things that you don't do well. So my friend Bianca was just like phenomenal at getting things done, like off the charts. I mean, I gave up trying to compete with that. And her sense, like just watching the way she did things, she just dived in and she was like, right, we're gonna write to the WHO or whatever. And she'd write the email. And the next morning there's an email, right, we're doing this. And I learned about just getting stuck in and not being perfect with it all. Amazing. And I learned from her about being in partnership with someone who does some things better than you and you do some things better than than them. So, I mean, it doesn't feel like there were many, but there were probably a few things I did better than her.
This is something I've got throughout your and working with you. That privilege of working with you and just in this conversation to your humbleness. So you keep going back to that, and I was before you get it stuck in, because there's one thing that I definitely heard you say, the acceptance. So we work with a framework. It's 4 A's. So the first one is awareness. So you're made aware of something and you become aware of it. Then you have to accept it. Then you said, I heard you say you do something, or it's action is the next A, and then adherence. Adherence is the fourth. So I was discussing with someone yesterday, so that action potentially could be the most difficult part of that, although acceptance is very difficult in being made aware. So awareness, acceptance, action, you do the thing, and then adherence is doing it over and over again. So those two things.
Yes.
So figuring out what you're doing. But that takes me into Bianca.
Yes.
What you said about Bianca is like, we have this thing where we talk about strategy and the smartest people in the room and everything.
Yeah.
And I've done my honors in brand strat. So like everyone's a strategist as far as I'm concerned. Like it's so competitive, and it's like no one really gets what it is. But everyone wants to think they're the smartest person in the room or anything like that. That's a generalization, but a lot of people do that. And what I believe is that execution can be everything. So you can have a beautiful strategy, and if you don't execute,
oh my goodness!
So execution.
Absolutely.
So Bianca was an executor.
She was an executor, and so and it's actually funny you say that, because what she did, I remember her. I think it was her 40th birthday or something. What she did was I forgot this even happened, but it was again so pivotal. This is my sign name, by the way, because I yeah. Tears come easy to
for
me.
The listeners,
they come easy.
Deb's waving her hands above her face.
Oh, right, yes, yeah.
Like she's about to cry.
I'm about to cry, yeah.
Love
but she had her 40th birthday party, and she invited somewhere in Kloof, I can't remember exactly where, here in Hillcrest, and she invited maybe 15 of her closest friends. And what she did on her birthday, she provided a beautiful tea for us. It was lovely. And then she, I remember that food being really good. But what she did is that she then honored each of her friends with a rose with a word on it that embodied, what her perception of who they are. And so my word, and each of them were honored with a rose, and she spoke for a few minutes about each of her friends and what they'd brought into her life. I mean, she's just such a giver. And mine was humility. And I was like, oh, like I didn't see myself as that. And after that, I've really identified with that word humility, and not again, by saying I'm humble is making me not look humble, but just, I think that is my superpower is humility. And I've looked at that word and I've analyzed it a lot, and I couldn't see it in myself. She had to say it. And, it's actually the ultimate confidence. It's the ultimate of confidence to be humble.
And to step into it and accept that you are humble as well.
And to accept that you are humble. But honestly, what I learned from Bianca, she's just one of the most pivotal people that I've learned from. Craig, I also learned, I've said already, the movement, the community, the loyalty, is just, But from her, just that, like, and she is so humble. I mean, she is actually way more humble than me. And that partnering, like she was so good at certain things. And actually what she wasn't so good at, I was good at. So together we were a partner. So I would say to anybody who wants to start a business or wants to do something, find a partner, because you're not going to be good at everything. And taking action, a perfectionist, doesn't want to take action because it might be wrong, right? Mm-hmm. You don't want to set yourself up for a failure at a marathon because like you're going to now do 4 hours. And everyone's going to say, what was your time? And you're going to say 4 hours and you're going to go, oh my gosh, they're going to think I'm a terrible runner. Who cares, right? Mm-hmm. However, it's all going on inside of us. And so that I just find yourself a partner because it gives you courage and that person is going to be good at stepping in where you're not. And I think that's also what I've taken into my role at Deaf Kids International. For me, the key is to hire in people that are going to give me the courage to lean into spaces that would not naturally do so myself. So then I can become a better leader, but they're leading me. And then I can be a better leader. And that, that's just, I think for me has been so important. It's almost more like getting the right personalities in the room, and then we've got, someone who's has the ultimate humility and someone who's just brings in so much nurturing. And when we need that, we can all lean in there. And then, the person who just flip and gets things done against the odds and you're giving her a job and it's done in that second. And I don't always do that. And sometimes I'm not great with communication and I forget to get back to people. She doesn't. And I see her modeling that the whole time and I'm like, I want to be like Althea, because she's and every single person in the organization, I mean, Steve brings that integrity that I'm so often like, I lean on that because, of course I've got integrity. I hope I do. And of course I'm trying to be good with communication, but it's seeing those characteristics pop out in all of my team that makes me want to be better in all of those aspects. So they are leading me. That is the way I see it. But I suppose, so that all ties in with humility.
Yeah. That's a superpower, by the way. And that's another one. I seem to have been fortunate. They all tie in. So there's definitely reasons for like the being awkward and being hairy keeps me warm, maybe. But being able to get the right people in the room, I've been able to step into that every now and again.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I just make coffee for them in the room and that magic happens. But I think that's what you've identified there for us is that you're a great leader, and in that position of a CEO, you need to be able to relinquish leadership so in certain instances because you're not going to be the best at those things.
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
When I became a parent, when I became a father, so my oldest is not mine biologically, but he's mine.
Yes, yeah.
So, what I realized that is my youngest is mine biologically, but he's not mine. He is mine. Sorry, correct that. He's mine biologically, but he is also mine. But they're both mine. I'm the guide, and that's all I have to do. I just have to guide them, and it sounds like that's what you relinquish guiding, and then step up to the main role. The main role is leadership, and that's what you actually really great at, and then you can the ability to be able to relinquish that makes you better.
Also, what's interesting is that I can do that well in my workspace. I cannot do it as well in my home space. I find it much harder to let go of the control at home. Yeah, because again, I know all this stuff. Come on, guys. You need to act with integrity. You can't let people down at the last minute. Like I find it hard when my kids do things wrong to be easy on them. Because I've learned those lessons, and I think that is your job as a parent. That's part of the guiding. Sometimes you have to be hard about it, and sometimes you have to let go and say, this is okay, and you've learned a lot through this experience.
And we touched on that. When the students ready, the teacher will appear. But they really have to be ready. And you said it. You couldn't have told yourself anything because you wouldn't have listened. So to tell people this the only thing this is the learning, and you need to do this. Like it's a should, and I think people. There's a lot more people than we talk about entrepreneurs not listening to that shit. But I think a lot of people, and maybe in family, it's more difficult. Like you should do that. That's a directive.
Yes.
And like it's why. Like why would I do that? It's like you have to trust me on this. Like sometimes you have to trust me, but then they need to learn those lessons. And
but it's hard.
Yeah, to watch it.
But again, it's almost like another layer for me. So I've learned all these lessons and I know them and in my workspace, but I need to there's another layer when I've got my girls, because I think also as a mom, you want to, your protective instinct is so strong that, you want to protect them from experiencing bad things and from learning their own lessons. But we all know, my goodness, I know this. And I saw it the other day, I think it was Jordan Peterson was like, let your children go out into the world. That was it. And that I was like, oh my goodness, absolutely. Let them struggle.
Because it's the most difficult thing to do too. It's the most difficult thing too. So just touching on that, you've made me think, we're coming into Easter and we don't spend too much time on this, but Jordan Peterson speaks about a piece by Michelangelo that has Mary in it watching the crucifixion, I think. And asked the question is, which is the more difficult place to be? On the crucifix or Mary's position? Crucifix? Because
for me, as a mom, my gosh.
The mother watching that happen, and that's what you do. That's what you're doing with that's what he says anyway. I'm repeating as almost like as close as I can get to what he's saying. It's you let them out into the world, and the world does that to your gift. So
exactly.
It's terrifying.
Exactly, it's terrifying. But I also feel. You get a lot of people who immigrate, and that's great. I feel that the best place for our children to be is in a country where they're going to experience struggle, because we can be there to guide them. So people always say, I want to I want to create some more opportunities and a better life for my children. And that's why we're moving. And great. I'm not saying that's perfect for that family. But I am so happy that my kids are in a country where they are going to actually experience a lot of struggle. They're also going to see a lot of reality at every robot. When someone's asking for money, they're going to see the reality. They're going to experience struggle. They might not be picked when they should be picked. They might, they're going to get out into the workforce and they're going to know that, this ain't going to come easy to you. And I believe if you've got those characteristics, you'll make it anywhere in the world. I think Wayne Dyer, I remember listening to something he said and someone had said to him, we moved from California to, I'm making these names up now, from California to San Diego because, the people in California were so, blah, blah, blah. And, they were so like this. And then they said to him, and what are the people like here? And he said, they're exactly the same as what they are in California. Meaning, the way you perceive your life, you can go anywhere in the world, you're going to perceive it the same way. The shift needs to happen in you to perceive things differently.
Yeah, you see the world as you are, not as it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And sometimes I'm like, damn it.
No, you need to remind yourself
that. I'm stuck in this, So it's, you and again, the shift doesn't always happen when you want it. You need to shift in something and it doesn't necessarily happen in that moment. Should I just talk about my other
thing? Yes.
So the partnership with Bianca, absolutely. But I mean, what I've got written here is a conference that I spoke at. Sorry, a conference. This was also just this relates to my quote actually. So about.
Should we go to the quote?
Yeah, let's go to the quote.
So that's usually at the end, but we'll switch it up. Okay, are you able to?
I'll read that. So obviously John had asked for my favorite quote of all time. I've got many favorite quotes. This is my quote. I wrote this down when I was probably like 20-something years old. It reads, there are times when life offers you a square centimetre of chance. And if you have the courage at that moment to grasp that square centimetre, your life will be changed in an instant. so for me, what I've learned, so during the imposter years, I spent a lot of that time did a lot of seeking, and a lot of discovering, but I was essentially seeking for a silver bullet that was going to fix this, that was going to, and not that I needed a huge amount to be fixed. I was always very happy, but there was going to be something that was going to make me financially abundant and perfect in relationships and all of that. And then I discovered that those silver bullets don't exist, I'm afraid. But what does exist is moments in your life where you have a choice, and you often don't even register it. You have a choice to seize an opportunity, and it's very often a small thing. And this, in my life, was probably the most. There were many times, there are many small opportunities that I have seized, many of them since this time, because I really learned the lesson here. And so there was an opportunity. Again, I was working still in corporate at that stage. I was working in IT in Mhlanga, but I got approached to talk at a conference around child safeguarding. And I remember, and then I was like, in my head, I'm, dear imposter, imposter, I'm not worthy of that. What do I know about, all of this stuff? But it was an interest of mine. It was definitely an interest of mine. And someone says, do you want to do this presentation? It was to do with, it was run by the Centre for Deaf Studies, and it was going to be a big conference in Joburg, an international conference. Do you want to do this session? And straight away, I'm like, not worthy. And I just said, yes, I'll do that. In my head, I'm going, what the heck? I took that opportunity. And then all of a sudden she was like, and you're going to be working with this professor from the University of Manchester who's a specialist in this stuff. So I was even more like, you're not enough for this. The voice was like, you're not enough for this. This is what? Why you? This is ridiculous. And, what happened then was that we were going to co-present, me and this professor. And what she did was she gave me loads of research articles. And she said, this is what I think we should talk about, read this stuff and come back with what you think. And I was like, God, do you not know I've got a full-time job? And at that stage, I think, did I have 2 or 3 children? 3 children. I've got 3 children. And when the heck am I going to read all of this stuff? Anyway, I was like, okay, I've said yes. Out of my comfort zone, let me just do it. I went through all these. I've got a file still at home, like a lever arch file filled with all these research papers. And it was talking all about why are deaf children vulnerable. This is my life's work, right? I didn't realize it at the time. Oh my gosh. So I remember my mom and Craig had to babysit for weekend after weekend after weekend as I plowed through these research papers and, basically extracted all this stuff and, went back to her and said, this is what actually we should be talking about. My point is that she didn't give me the answers. She made me do the work. And I cannot tell you how many times in my work this is one of the reasons, apart from having the lived experience of having a deaf child, why I'm so good at what I do, because I really understand it, because she made me read that whole lever arch file of research articles. So, and I'm so thankful to her, even though at the time I was really irritated. I'm like, do you not know how busy I am, Yeah. And I was so out of my comfort zone. I remember the day of going into that. Luce just bought me a tissue.
Just in case.
It's like being an emotional roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
And I just, but in that moment, so after going through that whole experience, and then, so Deaf Kids International, what we do is we do child protection and safeguarding for deaf children around the world, but we focus very much on low resource settings because that's where the children are the most vulnerable. So, that moment when I did all that work has just led me, that opportunity that I chose to take in that moment where I didn't feel enough for the opportunity, but I chose to take it anyway, is what has led me to this most amazing world where I am not an imposter. I feel deep inside of me that it's my life's work, which only took me until the age of 50 to discover. But I always knew I was heading somewhere. And then when it landed, I was like, right, this is where I was going. This is where I was, it sort of, I didn't say to myself, right, this is where I was going, but I felt it inside of me. This is where that was all leading me, from the, I guess, the finance work, because, you can't be a CEO and not understand finance, to all the discomfort, to that, seizing that opportunity. And even when you said you want to do this podcast, I'm like, there's Oscar Chalipsky and there's me, But I knew from that experience I had, I'm like, you seize it. You seize it. Driving here, I was like uncomfortable. I'm like, oh, out of my comfort zone. Not uncomfortable, but, this feels a bit out of my comfort zone or me, But it's so solid in me that you seize these opportunities. You seize them, you take them, and you ain't in that circle. You're where the magic happens, but you have to seize those small opportunities, most of which are going to be outside your comfort zone. And it's incredible how your life will unfold. The Alchemist, one of my favorite books. When you guys were talking about books earlier on, I was like, The Alchemist and The Red Tent. Yeah. But The Alchemist, such a beautiful one where, I can't remember the exact quote. It's what was one of my other quotes written down, but it's something along the lines of, if you desire something with all your heart, the entire world will conspire to make that happen. But obviously you have to work at it. You can't just come up with a dream and then, okay, come along. You have to work. You have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to be consistent.
That's interesting. So there's something in that, and I got it. So I love the abundance you spoke about. There's something that came out about abundance, and people have this, like, talk about manifesting and abundance as a thing. And abundance is great, but then I feel the shadow of abundance is entitlement. So you must definitely be open to it, but you have to do the work. The world owes you nothing. Will return you to zero. That's the thing. So love the abundance, love and stepping into it. Your current role as CEO, and you've touched a bit on Deaf Kids, but there's Deaf Defenders. There's probably, again, we could spend a whole nother podcast on that. But can you just take us through? So we've gone past, now we're in present, guys.
Yes,
if the listeners have picked that up, how this works as well with the Lifeline. But present as CEO of Deaf Kids International. And talked a little bit about what the work you're doing. Any highlights in that? What projects? Just Defenders, Deaf Kid Defenders, yes, for instance, would be one of them.
Yes. So Deaf Kids Defenders is probably our we have two flagship projects, but our Deaf Kids Defenders is definitely probably our most significant flagship program, and it uses an ed tech resource to so that's a video animation and a video game to teach deaf children about safety, and it also goes it's not a standalone resource. It goes along with a program which teaches children in-person teaching, although we currently exploring ways of not removing but lessening, becoming kind of more standalone and lowering the in-person teaching that's required, because that's a better model for scaling. However, we still need to think through that a lot and pilot it. But because we're a non-profit and it's all funders all mostly know about scaling. How are you going to scale this across the world and reach 1 million people? And we are not about that really at Deaf Kids. We are about doing things authentically. That's the most important thing for us, and ensuring that impact is deep. But Deaf Kids Defenders, and we teaching that, currently in Pakistan, South Africa, because we are a worldwide organization, but obviously the countries we work in depends on where the funding is and where we have strong strategic partners. So in Pakistan, South Africa, Zambia, which is a country, dear to the heart of DKI as well, and also in Kenya. And we do have plans to also, scale that further, but also scale it deeper, meaning because we not only work with the children, but we also work with caregivers and we work with teachers. And we have very much of a schools-based model. Why is that? Well, because deaf children unfortunately are not all born in one province in one country. They are born all over the place. So you need to, to work with them and support them. You need to find places of community for deaf children, and those are schools is a very obvious one. Oh my goodness, this topic now when I get started about it. But yes, and again, so we are wanting to protect deaf children from experiencing abuse. And why do we want to do that? Well, it's obvious, I think. But for me, it's really...
but they're more vulnerable.
They are more vulnerable than hearing children. All children are vulnerable. All children in low resource settings are especially vulnerable. Deaf and other disabled children are highly, highly marginalized. I'll just say one thing, especially this is for deaf children particularly. The key thing is that they don't learn incidentally. So 80% of what we know comes from overhearing things. It's obviously different for everybody. Overhearing conversations, the radio, the TV, your peers talking over there, whatever it is. But you overhear things, you take it in, you embody it. It's information to you. And deaf children don't benefit from that at all. They only learn if somebody is directly telling them something or signing to them in language that they can comprehend. So low language levels means even if someone is telling them something directly, they have typically very low language levels. You don't receive as much information, but you also don't learn incidentally. So you can imagine that a deaf child would have a very, very restricted view of the world. So it's very difficult for them to understand about relationships, So this relationship is a romantic relationship. This relationship is a friendship. This is a relationship I have with a parent, and they're all different. They don't necessarily understand that. They don't necessarily understand risks or are able to perceive risky situations or people that are risky, for example. They also don't, if something's happening to them, they don't necessarily even know that it's not safe. Because, the first thing we do with Deaf Kids Defenders, and oh my gosh, I wish we had forever to talk about this. But I taught the program. The first person that ever taught the program was me. And this was when I was actually with the organization Thrive. It was before I was with Deaf Kids. And I went in there and I was like, right. I was actually at Fulton School for the Deaf, just down the road here. And I was like, right, I'm going to teach these kids. And I had an interpreter. Whoa. 2 hours later, I came out and I was like, I am exhausted. I was driving home back to Westville. I phoned my mom and said, please, can you pick up the children from school? I slept. It was so difficult because we got in there and we realized, oh my gosh, I'm teaching to a group of people that don't have language. How do you teach without language? So, oh my goodness. So the learning for me in understanding this program, which is one of the other reasons why I'm just born to do this job, was because, and again, I was way out of my comfort zone going into that classroom. And what I learned from those experiences myself, someone could say, this is how you teach a deaf child. You have to set context. You have to give examples. You have to do role plays. You have this, there's a whole list of, methodologies for teaching deaf children. I learned those because I got them all wrong. That first day when I went into Fulton. So I went on this massive learning journey. And but I guess what my point in this is to say, you it's all about context. So you have to go in and you're teaching deaf children for the first time. You're not, we have 7 topics and we teach them about trusted adults, saying stop, private body parts, the difference between good and bad secrets. We talk about imposters online, and a few online topics. But you actually can't do that going into the classroom. You have to sit there, and the first thing you do is establish what language they have and establish, do they know what it means to be safe? That's the basics of it. So this, answering your, why is this work so important? Well, these children generally don't know that when they don't feel safe, they don't actually know that they're not feeling safe. And then they don't know that they can actually do something about it. And even if they know that they can do something about it, they don't know what to do. They don't know that, no one's ever told them. So just the significance of teaching those skills to the children. And we go through this whole, I'm like, no, we don't start with module 1. We start with, module -10, teaching them this is what safe means, this is what unsafe means, this is what it feels to be safe and unsafe. This is what your body does when you're not safe. That's how we start setting all that context. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that that they are so vulnerable. That was your question.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's good.
That is how vulnerable these children are. And, I believe that every adult in the world is responsible for every child in the world. There's no, that's our job, guys.
It's guarding.
It's guarding. And exactly guarding. And it's not only with your children, it's with every child.
Because they're not your children, yeah. You're just
and anyway, even your children that you think are your children are not your children.
Yeah.
But we are responsible for all those children, and we are responsible for protecting their rights and making sure that they are able to thrive. And what is required? Safety. So the very first layer in a child's life, if they're not given safety, if they are experiencing abuse in whatever form, their number one fundamental right to feel safe 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year is taken away. And you can't, how do you build from that? So really for us, it's about restoring justice to those children and ensuring that their rights are upheld so that the baseline from which they start their life and their growth is one of is solid. Again, I could go on forever.
That's where you get to move from.
Yeah.
You mentioned, we can go back to it, but I just want to make sure we get to what you presented as a marketing or ad.
Yes.
Okay. So because you mentioned context, that triggered me to remember this.
Absolutely. Context.
And this is a South African favorite.
Yes.
And one of my favorites, and maybe everyone knows about it, but I don't know. It's the Beat the Benz ad by BMW.
Yes.
So we went, before the session, we went and looked at and we'll have this in the show notes, guys, and for those listening, we're not going to show listen to the whole thing. It's not that. It's not radio, it's TV. It's a TV commercial, so it doesn't work in this medium exactly. But it will be in the show notes. The initial television ad was Mercedes-Benz, an accident that happened to an individual, and that he survived. And he only would have survived because of two things. He had a seatbelt on, and he was driving the Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah.
And then the ad that we'll show quickly is the quick rebuttal from the BMW team called Beats the Benz. And here it is.
Doesn't it make sense to drive a luxury sedan that beats the Benz?
I absolutely love it. That's it. But I think it was restricted. It was pulled down. They weren't allowed to push.
Yes,
go live with
I
it.
forgot about that.
And
I remember that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And that makes it even more remarkable. Potentially, because now it's like, well, what's that restricted
That
thing?
was because it was considered competitive marketing.
So, they mentioned the line at the end there is beats the Benz or whatever.
Beats the Benz.
When you rather drive something that beats the Benz, and it's just very clever because it's Chapman's Peak.
Yeah.
And that car doesn't go over versus the Mercedes-Benz that did go over.
Just so clever.
It was pulled off, and then that makes it, as I said, more remarkable, I would say, because people do that. I mean, Nando's do this brilliantly, the team there. And I think they've just switched agencies, which is a big one. But I stand to be corrected there. They'll go live with something quite controversial,
right.
like let's be honest, very controversial, on a Friday or like late on a Friday night or something where there's a time frame where it can't be pulled down because it's Monday we do work and that sort of stuff. So, and by the time it's pulled down, it's been shared enough, and then it's been copied, and some random is going to put it up like it's out there in the world. And you strategically, clever in placing and doing that work. What we talked about, and I don't know if everyone knows about this, but Mercedes have since, and this is where the context comes in, because we've spoken about it on a previous podcast, and we talk about Simon Sinek from time to time, and he talked about one of his books is the games. What was it? Long game, playing the long game, and ultimate games and game theory and that sort of stuff. And context can be incredibly important, because Mercedes-Benz have now revisited their ad, and they have their ad now, and they got the same driver that was in the accident to drive Chapman's Peak, that accident, but now in an autonomous vehicle. And they make him, and you watch it, you can see the fear, you can feel it. It's a longer piece. Again, we'll have it in the show notes, where he releases the steering wheel on the bend that almost cost him his life. And I'm sure there's massive trauma in that. But he does it, and the vehicle navigates the bends. So it's brilliant, and it's just
so clever
to revisit it. But it also does give BMW an opportunity to say, "Hey, don't forget about us." And it's beautiful that you brought this. I think everyone should know this. Everyone is South African, and potentially everyone studying creative should look at these ads and see the work that was done there, the creativity. We've had guests on here. You mentioned Oscar Chalupsky, the No Retreat, No Surrender book. I recommend as it should be a South African mandate. Like, we should all read that. It should be a set book for South Africans. Pepe Marais, who was on recently, his first book we talked about there, Growing Greatness, definitely should be a set book for creatives, and this is probably a set piece for creatives. Like, you need to go and look at this. So beautiful piece.
Just so I remember, I've just never ever forgotten that. I saw it many years ago, and you're just so smart, right? Out the box, as Oscar says. Think differently. Think differently. So it's just the epitome of that.
So it takes the think differently when we analyze campaigns. We did, and one of the principles we do is think differently. Like, just be crazy beats strong. So how you could have made another ad about how safe if the BMW rolls, and it's got these extra pads and these extra airbag and all this, and then you just think of it a little bit differently. First principle, like, don't go over the corner, guys. Not a good idea.
So clever.
One of the questions we ask is throughout is who you mentioned, and you might have answered this already, but just for clarification, who are your incredible machines?
So, like, I'm gonna.
Who would you nominate as an incredible
I will
machine?
Nominate. I mean, I've spoken about a few, but I'm going to nominate my mom. My mom, because she's just like phenomenal. She's what is most remarkable about my mother, and I wouldn't have said this growing up probably, because my mom is not an overly emotional person. She's not, but my goodness, what I have noticed over the years is the strength of that woman. And where does her strength lie? It lies in taking action. So, I mean, there are different people in my life again, Bianca spoke about her taking action, but, I guess two things about my mom: her integrity. It's just never going to be compromised. She is never going to say something about someone without saying it to their face. She's not afraid, or she doesn't think of the fact, I might hurt their feelings. She's just saying it. But with honesty and like authenticity, and also just her ability to, it's like Oscar saying, I cried for 1 minute and then I've found the solution. That's my mother. Sometimes I'm like, Mom, just let me cry for 5 minutes. She's like, I'm crying for 1 minute, and then I'm finding a solution and I'm moving forward. And just having that kind of solid. I mean, my mom's now 77. I'm just laughing at a card my one daughter wrote to her on her birthday. But anyway, story for another day. But she, just her incredible ability, even at this age, to say there is a solution and we will find it and we will move on. And the other thing is just that solid, that, having that in your life as your mother is so solid. It's like nothing will derail us. Yes, we've got problems, of course, but nothing will derail us is the feeling. And but also what is so amazing about her is her ability to set boundaries. So, I mean, she does an incredible amount for us as a family, but what she will do is set the boundaries within that. So she's like, just a silly example, like, at the beginning of the week, I mean, I'm flying day by day, like flying by the seat of my pants. But she is right. Okay, I'm playing golf on Thursday and Saturday. I'm not available. And then that do not go back to her and ask her to do something on Thursday because she's playing golf. She sets the boundary. Or she'll be like, Maxine is not allowed to come into my place and watch TV. Like that.
Yeah.
Not just on one day. Why? Because Maxine's not listening to her and she's watching too much TV, and then she's out of control, and she knows she's like, Maxine's not watching TV. On Thursday when I'm at golf, Maxine's not allowed to come into my place and watch TV. It's like the boundary is set and it's firm, and that's it. So I realized, growing up, I didn't even realize this was happening. But when my mom said something, and she's a very calm person.
So you've got. I think you've nailed it there, and I can see the tie into Deaf Kids International and that focus on safety, because you said a solid ground, and boundaries.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
So the next, if we can transition into that, the next, any plan, like, do you want to talk us quickly about the next 5 to 10 year, the plans, future?
For deaf kids, yes.
And yourself.
I love that you've said that, and I suppose the deepness with which I have experienced that safety of the boundaries, but with complete service, but with boundaries is what we want to create for deaf children. That's what we want for them, that safety. And that's why I've been able to build and learn all these lessons. Had I not had the safety and been triggered along the way so many times and sabotaged myself because of the experiences I've had as a child, I would never have been able to have this amazing life that I've had. So for deaf kids, my goodness me, the plans, we have so many plans, but I think certainly this year, I would say, so we're originally a UK registered charity. I was the first employee that then was hired in South Africa, because it's a key partner country. It's always been a key country for deaf kids, where they've actually done their operational programmatic work. And since then we've hired another 5 people in South Africa. We've registered this past year. We've registered in South Africa, so that's been very, very pivotal. The buzzword in the industry is called decentralization. So you're decolonizing, which is just, without even using the buzzwords, it just makes so much sense. The people in our organization understand the context. Context is so important for everything in life. But we have plans this year. The most significant plan is for us to register in the United States as well. And that is quite a difficult process. It's a difficult undertaking, but it's amazing how these champions arise out of nowhere to support us on that journey. The main purpose of that is for fundraising, because obviously as a non-profit, I feel like I'm always running sort of 5 businesses because I'm a fundraiser. I'm trying to make the business strong. I'm HR. I'm a HR business. I'm a legal business because we've got to understand all of that. But actually, most importantly, we're serving deaf children and their families and communities. So many different facets, but it's really going to strengthen our fundraising, which will enable us to be more sustainable as an organization and to hire more people into the organization. We have great plans. So at the moment, we are focusing very much on testing this Deaf Kids Defenders game that we have spoken about, and also our Deaf Kids Gold program, which is learning about safety and life skills through sport. That's a flagship program we've been running in India for a number of years. We are really wanting to bring that program to Africa. But really we've got these great programs that focus on the children and the parents and the teachers, but we need to go deeper with that. So obviously we want that to go everywhere in the world, but we want to go deeper with that. And essentially what that is we realize that we've been focusing on teaching children, but very often they'll sit there and for the first time they realize, oh my gosh, I've experienced abuse. I've experienced this that they're telling me about, and it's not right. And I knew it was not right inside of me, but now someone's telling me that. But what we're trying to focus more on is creating the space where those children can disclose what's happening in their lives. So it's a space we haven't really focused on before, but I just see it's essential. And that's what I see as the deepening of the work. And then giving the children an opportunity to heal. So my feeling is that every single child should have that opportunity to heal. I mean, for goodness sake, me too, please, Yeah. All of it, but for these children to go into that space of healing so that we can, it's one thing stopping abuse from happening or helping children to be powerful, because a lot of our work is preventative, to be able to, you have the right to say stop. And very often we know that a perpetrator, if a child says stop, or if a child is not willing to keep a secret, that perpetrator is going to move elsewhere. Like, we know that from the stats. We also know that, so that's why we teach these preventative mechanisms to children. But then just the deepening of the healing space for children and holding that space for them to heal is something that we are wanting to grow in. A lot of nonprofits do work like that, incredible work, but those services are not accessible to deaf children. So that's our work, to make those services accessible. However that looks, we've got a massive mind map of all of this stuff, but figuring out that space. And we've got people we're working with in India, and I've got a call tomorrow with an organization in South America. We're very big on partnering in terms of figuring out, how do they do this healing work, and how do they get disclosures? What do they do with them, and how do they work that process? We love leaning on people, not only our own staff, but on other partners, and seeing how people are doing things. And it often means you have to travel to the country to really get into the nitty-gritty of the work, but we are big on that.
Again, context.
Context, yeah. My goodness,
and I thought
absolutely.
that just before we close, that we'll have all of this in the show notes. That Simon Sinek book that I was referencing was Infinite Games. Yeah. So
I've not. That's where I'm going now.
Yeah,
I'll be googling that in the car on my way home.
So I really enjoyed that.
Yes.
Okay. So back to it. Yeah. And you get deep in context,
and then also it's this concept of sort of. And actually, Luke introduced me to this concept through. I can't remember their name now. You did their podcast. This is when I was first introduced. I can't remember the
What's the context?
I want to say Rainbow Chickens, but
do more fun.
Yes, exactly. And this concept of scaling wide, and that means reaching more people, because the funders put pressure on you. I want to see scale and I want to see sustainability. Unfortunately, we are working in broken systems, and sustainability means do whatever you need to do so that you don't have to be around. Unfortunately, we are working in broken systems, education systems and social services and police and judicial services, because the systems are largely broken. You can't just, rely on those services. If you could, then you could be sustainable, but you can't rely on those services. So anyway, but scaling wide is basically reaching more people. But our focus definitely over the next year, yes, we are going to be doing that, definitely. But scaling deep this concept of scaling deep, doing the deeper work to have more impact with the same people. So you've done the program, the preventative program, and now you need, what can you do to amplify that impact? So it becomes exponential. So if you do the healing work with those children, and if you work in more deeper in the schools and make sure you have champions in the schools, we will never go away as an organization, but you keep feeding the champions who are then supporting the children more in their direct environments, is deep. Your work gets deepened. So all of that, you're in the classroom, you do the Deaf Kids Defenders, awesome. I mean, we know through doing robust monitoring and evaluation that it works. Our program works. But to do that extra deepening work then amplifies all the work we've already done, and it becomes exponential. And then, of course, we know that a child who's been able to heal from trauma is then able to be a better parent and protect their child.
And repeat. You're in the
cycle goes on.
Adherence phase. So action is death defendant. Sounds like what I'm thinking is adherence phase.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the last thing I will actually say, because this for me is also like so important about life, and it sort of links into what I've said, is that if you want results, and I know this through doing physical exercise and also through work, it's many things, but two things you have to know: discomforts and consistency. So if you want to be a better runner, you have to be prepared to go be uncomfortable. You have to push yourself. You can't just do the same 5K jog in 30 minutes. You have to, interval training, for example, would be pushing yourself and experiencing discomfort. The same way we said, emotional discomfort that comes from being on a podcast or presenting at a conference or whatever it is, that discomfort, but you have to do it consistently. You have to do it consistently. You can't just do it as a one-off and say, right, bring it on, change my life. You have to, and that's what I teach my children about getting results: discomfort and consistency. Yeah, and be willing to be with your feelings. Anyway, that's just the other one.
Well, it sounds like that's how you've lived your life, actually.
Actually, it is.
Yeah,
I didn't think that's exactly.
Yeah. So
with
I
the
think
safety of, knowing that it's always going to be okay, because we'll tackle whatever problem that comes along.
Yeah. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure. So
for me too, John.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. I think I've discovered a lot about
Luke.
myself just from being here.
Thanks, listeners and watchers. Yeah, it's been amazing.
Cheers. Thanks, John. Thank you, Luke.